Can you answer all 20 questions from the 60s correctly? Which world-famous music festival took place in 1969 and shaped the hippie era? Monterey Pop Festival, Woodstock, or Glastonbury? Woodstock, the iconic music festival of 1969, became a symbol of the peace and hippie movement, attracting over 400,000 attendees. Which British group gained worldwide fame with Hey Jude and Let It Be? The Rolling Stones, the Kinks, or the Beatles? The Beatles gained worldwide fame with hits like Hey Jude and Let It Be, defining the music of the 60s. Which film duo first appeared in God Forgives, I Don't, in 1967? Terence Hill and Bud Spencer, Clint Eastwood and Lee Van Cleef, or John Wayne and James Stewart? Terence Hill and Bud Spencer first teamed up in God Forgives, I Don't, in 1967, becoming legends in the action comedy genre. Who was appointed British Prime Minister in 1963? Edward Heath, Harold Wilson, or Alec Douglas Home? Harold Wilson was appointed Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in 1963, leading the country through significant social and economic reforms. Which country won the 1966 FIFA World Cup on home soil? Germany, England, or Brazil? England won the 1966 FIFA World Cup on home soil, defeating Germany in the final with a score of 4-2 after extra time. Which British secret agent, portrayed by Sean Connery, became famous in the 60s through several films? Ethan Hunt, Jason Bourne, or James Bond? British secret agent James Bond, portrayed by Sean Connery, became globally famous through 60s films like Dr. No and Goldfinger. What event took place on November 22, 1963 in Dallas? The Vietnam War ended, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, or the Cuban Missile Crisis began? On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, an event that caused global mourning and shock. Which British band released the hit Satisfaction in 1965? The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, or The Who? The Rolling Stones released the hit Satisfaction in 1965, which became one of the greatest rock songs of all time. Who was the US president until 1961? Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, or Harry S. Truman? Dwight D. Eisenhower served as the US president from 1953 until 1961. Which First Lady of the USA became a fashion icon in the 60s? Jacqueline Kennedy, Lady Bird Johnson, or Pat Nixon? Jacqueline Kennedy became a fashion icon in the 60s, known for her elegant style and public role as First Lady of the USA. Who was the first person to fly into space in 1961? Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, or Yuri Gagarin? Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first person to fly into space in 1961, becoming a global legend. Who was elected US President in 1968? Lyndon B. Johnson, John F. Kennedy, or Richard Nixon? Richard Nixon was elected US President in 1968 and later initiated the end of the Vietnam War, although his term was overshadowed by the Watergate scandal. Which 60s fashion trend was popularized by British designer Mary Quant? Platform shoes, miniskirt, or bell-bottoms? The miniskirt, popularized by British designer Mary Quant, became a symbol of women's liberation and fashion innovation in the 60s. In which year was the Berlin Wall built? 1961, 1962, or 1963? The Berlin Wall was constructed in 1961, dividing East and West Berlin until its fall in 1989. If you like it so far, subscribe to QuizPro. Who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964 but declined it? Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, or Gabriel Garcia Marquez? French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre declined the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964 to preserve his independence from institutions. What is the famous comedy starring Audrey Hepburn from 1961? Charade, My Fair Lady, or Breakfast at Tiffany's? Breakfast at Tiffany's, starring Audrey Hepburn, was released in 1961 and is considered one of the most popular romantic comedies in film history. Which space probe first sent images of Mars back to Earth in 1965? Pioneer 10, Mariner 4, or Voyager 1? The Mariner 4 space probe sent the first images of Mars back to Earth in 1965, providing valuable scientific data about the red planet. When was Columbo first aired? 1968, 1964, or 1961? Columbo, starring Peter Falk, was first aired 1968. Which world-famous film musical was released in 1965 and won multiple Oscars? Mary Poppins, The Sound of Music, or West Side Story? The film musical The Sound of Music won multiple Oscars in 1965 and became one of the most famous and successful musicals of all time. Which medication was banned in the early 60s after leading to thousands of birth defects? Valium, Contagan, or aspirin? Contagan was banned in the early 60s after causing thousands of birth defects, resulting in one of the biggest medical scandals of the 20th century. How many of the 20 questions about the 60s could you get right?